One of the biggest caveats I can offer to a new author coming into this is don't assume that the person on the stage knows what they're talking about. I mean, it sounds a little mean and blunt, but it's like, just because you're a good writer and you've had financial success doesn't mean that the underlying business is running really well. I've seen more author businesses that are doing mid 6 figures, 7 figures, but the actual money that the author is taking home verges on minimum wage because the business is bloated in its expenses and there's a lot of waste. And, it's like, yeah, I've sold $1 million worth of books and I only spent $700,000 in advertising.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
May I have a moment of your attention? Hello, Reflectives. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and this is episode 324 of the Stark Reflections podcast. And the question that I opened up with is the name of a new book by Joe Solari. And Joe is my featured guest on this episode. Now, Joe helps authors build great businesses. He offers business coaching and back office services for authors. When your business is aligned with your personal goals, it can only go great places. And Joe and I have a fantastic conversation about his new book, May I Have a Moment of Your Attention, as well as his previous book, Advantage, and an audit that he offers for authors, and so much more. You're in for a real treat, and that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by the awesome folks who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, where for additional $1 or $3 or $5 a month, or however many dollars you want to throw at me, actually, you get access to additional content, additional audio-only content for patrons only, as well as additional visual and video content that I post at Stark Reflections. No, I don't. I post it at patreon.com/starkreflections, and sometimes I'll post bloopers and other things that don't make it to the regular episode of the podcast. Like, for example, when I was recording this, I started off with, welcome to episode 334. No, wait, 234. 323. I mixed up all the numbers. I, of course, deleted that. It's gone forever. But sometimes you get the benefit of hearing me goof up. I mean, isn't that special? Just knowing that, like you, I'm human. Even though I often edit most of my gaffes and bloopers and mistakes out of the podcast, I do leave some of them in there just so you can laugh. But you do get access to additional content over at patreon.com/starkreflections, and a huge, gigantic thank you to all of the wonderful peeps who support this podcast at the aforementioned patreon.com/starkreflections. Okay, that is the end of the ad read for this episode. Okay, comments from recent episodes. First, I have to say just a huge thank you and shout out to the folks who commented, sent me direct messages and emails about their thoughts and their own experiences as I reflected in last week's episode 323. See, I got the numbers right every once in a while. About the rambling reflections from the road, this old house, as I was in the process. I was in my last days in my childhood home as it's selling closes on September 28th, and it's a 5-hour drive from here. So that's sort of like my last time in my house that I grew up in. And I just want to say thank you. Such incredibly thoughtful and lovely, beautiful messages from people. I'm not I didn't get permission to share them. I didn't ask. I'm sure they would have given me permission. I didn't share them, but I just want to say a huge thank you to so many of the people who messaged me and shared your own reflections. And my apologies, I just got really sidetracked because I was looking at the audio feed. I use Audacity to record this, and I noticed that it was only recording the left channel. I will have fixed that in post-production, but it was only recording the left channel, not stereo. So my apologies for this weird distraction I just had as I was trying to talk and went, wait a second, why is it only recording the left channel? I figured it out, and I switched it back to stereo recording. Apparently, it's a button you press on Audacity. But back to that episode, back to Reflections of the Childhood Home. I do have some comments I wanted to share from those recent episodes. So this came on starkreflections.ca for episode 323, the Rambling Reflections from the Road, This Old House. And this comes from Stanley B. Trice, who says, thanks for this reflection of the house you grew up in. Change, to include death, comes to us all. It is great you seem to have accepted both, although I'm sure it was hard. And yeah, Stanley, it was difficult, and I still am sort of thinking about it. I guess because it's not yet out of my hands, it's still mine. I could, do the 5-hour drive and just go sit in the kitchen again, or sit in the house with mostly no furniture. But no, I've come to accept it. I mean, my mom passed away last April 2022, and so I've had a long time to process the fact that I probably am not going to be keeping the house. But thank you for that. Over on Twitter, David Boydo shared, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. David shared a writer's heartfelt philosophical reflection on the nature of home. Worth a listen, and shared the link. Thank you, David. I love when people share links to episodes that they appreciate. That's one of the wonderful ways that you can support the podcast, and it doesn't cost you anything more than a little bit of your time and wonderful consideration. Thank you for that, David. Glad that it resonated with you. And Edwin Downward, author on Twitter, said, the latest Stark Reflections has him rambling about the concept of home from the kitchen of his childhood home. I, on the other hand, have no fixed idea of home. If I were to move tomorrow, the new house we took up residence would be home. And thank you for that, Edwin. I love that reflection, because that is... I felt really tied to that space, even though I had lived in numerous other places over the years. That was always sort of a home base I always came back to. And so at the age of 54, here I am, finally leaving home, even though I really left home when I was 18. And home has been many places in Ottawa, many places in Hamilton, and currently, a single place in Waterloo. Although that I always had that shadow of home in the background. So thanks for sharing that, Edwin, because that truly is the essence of home is where you hang your hat, or home is where the heart is, or whatever other a purple passage related to home you can think of. And speaking of Twitter, thanks to Reedsy for sharing my interview with Ricardo from episode 322. And in a tweet, they said that key to a successful book, quality. Marketing can only go so far if your book isn't connecting with readers. And if you want to go back and listen to that episode, it's fantastic. Interview with Ricardo about these great online craft of writing a novel in 3 months courses. Fantastic. I highly recommend you check that out. Even just check out the interview with Ricardo, because there's some great value in there. And also a huge thanks to Self-Publishing with Dale Roberts over on Twitter, who shared that my book, Wide for the Wind, was one of his favorite reads of the year. Oh, I hate hearing that. I never get tired of hearing that. Dale said it makes me more excited than ever to launch my next books. Your book will most certainly be in the resource section in the back of my books. And oh, that is high praise indeed. Thank you so much for that, Dale. If you, dear listener, would like to reflect, comment on anything that you hear, or stuff that in the interview or in the other segments of me blathering on that they make you reflect on, I'd love to hear those. You can message me directly, mark@markleslie.ca, since no one wants to spell lefave.markleslie@gmail.com. That's just way too many letters in the alphabet there. You can leave comments over on starkreflections.ca or even on the Twitter sphere. I'm at Mark Leslie. You don't even need to spell the Lefave thing, even though it's in my profile name. Anyways, love to hear your reflections and what you're thinking about, what you are reflecting on as you're listening 2 episodes of the podcast. And now, a short personal update. I am sitting here in Waterloo, Ontario, and reflecting a little bit on the fact that I'm not at Novelist NINC in St. Pete Beach, Florida, and why I'm not there. Now, before I tell you why I'm not there, I need to express the fact that I love the people of NINC, Novelist NINC, and NINC is one of the premier conferences that I so look forward to going to, not only because the people who run and manage and organize NINC, all of them, from top down to bottom, every single one of them, are absolutely phenomenal, stellar people who do an amazing job of providing a great community for authors. I love meeting with them every year in Florida, as I have for many, many years. A couple of years for COVID excluded. But I love the people who attend NINC. I love connecting with people there at the beach, especially even the staff of Tradewinds Hotel in Florida. Absolutely love going there because it's been there. The first year I went to NINC, it wasn't there, but then it started. The second year I started going to NINC. And I just love it. I even know many of the staff by name and get to see them every year, and it's really exciting. I love hanging out with authors on the beach, talking about the business. Heck, NINC is how I knew Chris Austin, the CEO of Draft to Digital, but it was at Novelist NINC one year that Chris and I got into a really long conversation, and I ended up coming to work part-time for Draft to Digital. So I love NINC. I love the people at NINC. I love all the people I engage with there. And personally, I'm a huge craft beer fan. Always the day before the conference starts. Always, for me, I've always gone out and checked out the craft beer scene. But I started organizing a beer crawl. It was a books and beer crawl. We'd go to Haslam's bookstore when it was still open, and then go to a whole bunch of beautiful, phenomenal breweries in St. Pete, Florida. And I really miss them because I'm a huge beer nerd. So why when I love and respect and adore all of the people involved in this conference, why did I refuse to go this year? Because I was slated to go and I canceled it. Well, I had someone reach out to me. A few people reached out to me, but one person in particular who reached out to me and said, what are you going to do about this? Because the state of Florida is a shit show, for lack of a better term. It is backtracking. It is ridiculous how they are banning books, how they are removing the rights of people I care about. And the question stuck with me. What am I going to do? And I thought, what am I going to do as a guy with all of the privilege in the universe? I am a cisgendered, male, heterosexual, middle-aged, tall, middle-class white guy. I have all the privilege you could possibly imagine. But there are people I care about whose lives are threatened going to a place like Florida. There's even been travel advisories warning about the safety. And I thought, again, I love the people of NINC, the sponsors, the people who are sponsoring NINC, anything involved. I know they can't change that. They're locked in for years. They're wonderful people. And I hold nothing but the utmost of respect for them. But I can't, at least at this moment in time, justify going and spending, because I spend a lot of my personal money. I spend a lot of Draft to Digital's money, but I spend a lot of my personal money in Florida. And I can't do it. Not this year. I do, and this decision is hard because I am so sad and personally missing out on such amazing opportunities to connect with people I love. I adore them. NINC has always been an important thing for me. So the fact that I'm personally hurting, that I personally miss all of the awesome people that I'm not spending time with, is good. It's good for me to hurt. It's good for me to miss out. It's good for me to lose out because I have all the privilege you can imagine. And I needed to, even if it's a quiet protest, I needed to sort of state why I'm not going. And I know I'm going on about this for a long time, But it's really important for me to stand up and to talk about inclusion and love and respect, and actually to personally suffer. And no, I'm not suffering. No, God, no, I'm not suffering. I have all the privilege. But I am missing out on one of the highlights of my year. And getting to hang out. I mean, this is the second time I've missed out an opportunity to meet Aaron Wright in person from Wide for the Win. And Aaron and I talk all the time online. But again, this is an opportunity. And, Monica Leonel is there, and we chat all the time too. And so just those two of dozens and dozens and dozens of people I just can't wait to hug and hang out with and spend time with. And so, yes, I am personally hurting because of it. I'm not personally threatened. My livelihood is not threatened, or any of the things that there's so many people who are oppressed by the bullshit that is going on in a state like that I wanted to make a statement. And yes, I'm using this platform to make that statement. I want people to understand that I do care about the rights that are being stripped away from so many other people who are not as lucky as me in all of the privilege that I exist in. And so, yes, I did not go to NINC. But again, nothing against the good people there, nothing against the attendees, the staff, the breweries, all of the lovely and wonderful people that I just love who are there. But I do have an issue with what the state is doing in stripping away those rights. And I wanted to make that known. I wish there was something more I could do, but there's often we can't do everything. And we can almost break our backs trying to do the things, but it was a thing I was able to do. And I just wanted to share that. So that's my personal update. I will get back to writing updates and stuff because there's so much going on. I can't even keep track of it all. But that's me blathering on for the introductory matter. I am done with the introductory matter and all the stuff. You know what we should do now, you and I? You should take my hand if you're willing to take my hand, or we can just walk together if the touching thing is not a thing. And let's venture forward together, shall we, as I get the opportunity to introduce you to a person I'm really looking forward to seeing in Vegas in November again, because I had a really wonderful time hanging out with him in Vegas last year. We had some really fun bar conversations, and I so hope I get an opportunity to do that with him again. But I get to introduce you to Joe Solari, and even if you have heard Joe before and know Joe, you probably know the treat, the mental exercise treat, the wonderful inspirational treat of listening to him. And that, my dear friend, is coming up right after this bumper. Hey, Joe, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Great to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Well, now that I have your attention, teaser, foreshadowing. No, I do want to ask a little bit about, just for my listeners, if you can share a bit of your background on how you got into the space that you're now in, like how you became Joe Solari.
Yeah, because it's not like, here's one of the craziest things is like, there's no way you could train for the job that I do today.
Okay. All right.
Right. Like how do you get prepared to be somebody that helps authors with their business and their marketing, and high net authors. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when I was, you and I are similar age, it's like this industry didn't really exist in the form it is. Like you couldn't go, like even today, if you went to college, they wouldn't teach you how the industry is today. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's been a winding path that put together, a particular set of skills that makes me really relevant in the author community, because I've been a small business owner for years. I've owned and operated multiple businesses. I've participated in businesses from like bootstrap investment to where we raised $21 million in 18 months from a publicly traded company into a private startup. So I've had all this experience that when I sold my last business, my wife had been publishing. And so I knew enough about it to help her and enough about it to think, well, of course I could write a great book and people would buy it. Right.
Right.
So I did that. And, like the 6 people that bought it happened to be authors, and they were looking for that kind of help. And the idea about how do I use business practices as a creator to be a better business, right? And I think that's really over time, what's changed for me is when I came in, it was like, here's just some general business practices. Like, here's the things you need to do. You need to understand a profit and loss. You need to understand how to, account for your taxes, all the really things that apply to all businesses.
Yeah.
And that was like 2016, 17. And what's happened since working with authors and my partner, Lisa, who's a CPA, we do their back office. So we're doing payroll, we're doing bookkeeping, we're helping them with a marketing strategy, all these facets of the business. I then had to start learning how the industry really worked, right? I couldn't just use the same old table magic that worked for any business. There's things that you need to know specific for this industry to make your business perform better. So that's really what probably the last 4 or 5 years, and the impetus of writing this book has all been about, is me continuing to improve my craft.
Right. Well, I have to ask, because you have this extensive experience in business and helping businesses run very efficiently, very effectively, all of that expertise. And then you come into this, for lack of a better term, ass backwards industry. I have to ask, how many points along the way did you see these things that look like, oh God, no, they're never going to get it, or this is never like, how am I going to make this work? Were there roadblocks like that you had to overcome?
Daily.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest caveats I can offer to a new author coming into this is, you go to great conferences and they have people there that have been successful, is don't assume that the person on the stage knows what they're talking about.
Okay.
I mean, it's that, like, it sounds a little mean and blunt, but it's like,
yeah,
just because you're a good writer and you've had financial success doesn't mean that the underlying business is running really well. Like, you could be, I've seen more author businesses that are doing mid 6 figures, 7 figures, but the actual money that the author is taking home verges on minimum wage, because the business is bloated in its expenses and there's a lot of waste. And, it's like, yeah, I've got I've sold $1 million worth of books and I only spent $700,000 in advertising.
Right.
Okay. Like, there's things that, when you start to look at it from a different perspective, like, well, oh, you mistook 7 figures as being financially secure. Those are two different things. In fact, growing a business that big, you're less secure than you've ever been.
Wow. Okay.
Right. Like, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And for me, it's been discovery on my own. Like, oh, when I can help an author really see what they want out of this business as an investor, it's like, they think they want what they saw on the stage. And then they realize, no, I really don't need that. What I need is more time with my kids, and I need to be coaching my baseball team, and I need to be, doing, and it's like, oh, well, that doesn't cost $1 million.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I like that. I love that.
Yeah.
What was the first event or conference or whatever that you went to, that I'm sure the first one sticks out in your mind? Do you remember where it was?
Yeah, it was 20 books.
Okay.
And it was the very first one. I've been to every single one of them.
Okay.
And Craig, and there's kind of a weird story about it, because I'd been helping with the Facebook group, and he mentioned he was doing this conference, and I'm not I've been to a lot of conferences in a lot of industry, and it's like, and I've spent a lot of time in Vegas, like, that I don't care to talk about anymore. But like, so I'm like, I'll go in for a day. I'll fly in, I'll check this thing out and see what these guys are really up to. And then I'll bug out, because I don't want to spend overnight, especially where that place was at.
Right.
And
oh, come on, Sam's Town's awesome.
I love Cops Las Vegas. So I go to look, and I see that I'm not only am I scheduled to speak there, but I was scheduled to speak 2 days.
Oh, change your plans.
It's a change of plans, right? So that was my, like, okay, well, I've got to go. And then it was like, well, what am I going to talk about, Craig? And he's like, well, just talk about business stuff. So I was really just basics, trying to pull this stuff together. And I would think if there was one thing that really kind of blew my mind, there's 2 things that really blew my mind at that event. One was, I went to Michael's dinner and met so many authors that were wildly successful. And I
Right.
couldn't comprehend people making that kind of money writing the stuff they were writing. It just
Right.
didn't compute.
Yeah.
And number two was that sense of community. I had never been to an event where there was such a strong sense of community about, hey, we're all trying to figure this out together. And that really changed my focus. Like, I want to be part of this. Like, I saw at that event, it's like, holy cow, this is the golden age of content creation. There's going to be some amazing stuff that happens now. And I could have courtside seats to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh man. Yeah. While the stadium's being built.
Well, yeah. and we're making the rules for the teams. And,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah. And I think that's, I've certainly seen that. And I think that we're still in the early stages of this whole thing.
Yeah, I love that you recognize that it is still early stages, because it is still such a young industry, and such a small like ebooks, when you think about digital, are still such a small percentage of the overall industry.
Oh, just in the time that I've been involved in this, and one of the observations clients that are in certain genres, lit RPG, science fiction, and they're doing really well selling their ebooks. And then we can see, oh, if you are putting these books in audio, there's an equally as big, maybe bigger audience, especially in those genres where people aren't necessarily readers, but are consumers of story.
Yeah.
They're just not going to read. They haven't read a book since 8th grade, right? But they love lit RPG. They love science fiction. They love fantasy. So it's like, oh, that same piece of content now could make you twice as much profit. And then when you add into that, it's like, and if you, in certain genres, when you go direct with that audio, you double that profit sooner with much smaller amount of customers. Right. So like, and that's just happened in the last few years. Like that, when I came in, that wasn't something you could do. Right. Yeah. Sure. There were some people that probably were doing some weird stuff, but like, it wasn't like so obvious to like, oh yeah, this is a really expansive business model, which then makes me why I'm so excited. Is like, there's some dude in some garage that's going to invent some media that we have no concept of at this point, and our stories can then be put into that.
Yeah, exactly. I love that, because we have no idea of where that's going to go, and I'm sure you agree to the sort of the philosophy that it's story, it's your IP. An ebook is one asset. Audiobook is multiple kinds of assets, obviously, depending on the delivery and the format, or even before we started recording, we talked about, I have an AI voice, you have an AI voice, and we leverage it for verbal typos for a podcast, so you can just quickly clean up the language instead of having to go back and re-record the whole thing.
It's crazy.
So I guess, is that one of the things that you help authors understand when they think about their business? Is, yes, we're passionate about story and storytelling and all the things we do, but reminding them of the way that they're exploiting or leveraging their IP?
Well, I think that there's, in my strategy of where things are today, it's, you have to have different assets in your business. So intellectual property is a core asset, right? It's something that seems to be infinitely sliceable, right? The more ways that people come up with things, the more ways that you can potentially license that out to other people. But then there's this other part that is as important, and that's your asset of audience, right? Because the reality of the world we're in is content is infinite. There's no end to content that's out there. What is the, in a supply demand kind of world, the part that matters in this is the demand, right?
Yeah.
The more that you can focus your business around the idea of like earning people's attention and having it in a standby state, so that when you do have new content, they're ready to go, that becomes what is scalable. Right. So much of what we hear in the marketing pieces is like, well, how do I get my ads to scale? Well, and people hate me for saying this, but I don't believe ads are scalable. Right. I think you can use ads as a tool to scale an audience, but only an audience is scalable.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well,
Yeah.
and this is a perfect introduction to what we wanted to talk about. The main topic or the main focus today is your new book. First of all, what's the title, subtitle of the book? When's the release date? Let's get those details right out front. We're gonna not bury the lead.
Sure. So it's may I have a moment of your attention? And this here's another thing that's kind of, we're in a world where you can release books in a different way. So
Yeah.
this book, how I've like I first I can't buy this book on Amazon. And so I only sell it direct.
It's only going to be available direct, or it's only,
Yeah.
is it now available when we're talking?
Yeah, it's available. It's available.
Okay.
And so how this book got produced is I have a subscribers to my email, and
Right.
I had a series called Game of Cults, which was a whole thing about how people build audience and cults and gamification.
Right.
And part of my premise for subscribers who paid for that subscription was I would create a book on it. And I thought the book was going to be just, I would throw the 45 emails and put them in vellum and send them out. But what ended up happening is I went through this learning experience, and I came up with a system to apply the stuff I talked about. And this whole idea of how you can build this asset of attention and how it's something that you have to be very focused on. So that's how the book came into fruition. And so those people that were paid subscribers, I sent them the book, right? They got it.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, now I have this new piece of content, like we were just talking about, this new IP that I can release. And I chose, because of how I'm building my brand, is that I'm not going to just put it everywhere. And one of the big parts of this thing is helping people understand how to use the book. And so I created an audit of 20 statements that I ask you to rate on a scale of 1 to 5, how you feel about them. So for example, one of the statements is, I understand how the popularity market works. 1 being, I don't have a clue. 5 meaning I've got it completely figured out.
Right.
Well, you go through those statements, you're going to get a score between 20 and 100, right?
Okay.
60 would be neutral, a 3 on everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
My results so far is 80% of the people that take this thing are below a 59.
Okay.
So the marketplace as a whole feels that when they are looking at how I think about marketing, they don't feel comfortable. They don't feel they understand it, or they don't know how to apply it. And this all gets to what we talked about earlier, which is about that asset of attention. Like, how can you build a system where it works with the market, right? Because like I mentioned, this idea of a popularity market. Like, here's the bad news, authors. You're not in a pure supply demand market. You're in a winner take all popularity market, right? Where a very few amount of people get most of the money. When you understand how it works, you can actually start using those forces to your benefit. Like, you can design your marketing system so that it's supercharged by that, right? And that's what I'm trying to help people do in this whole process.
Oh, wow. So this, it always begins then, for most people who may want to look at this, is with the survey, right? So they can understand where they fit in.
I think so. And the idea in the book is if you were, say you got the book through the subscription, it's like, hey, go take the survey, see how you do, read the book, apply the book and fix some of the areas where the weakest, see what happens to your business when your score goes from 40 to 70.
Right. Okay.
Right. Because all this marketing stuff's so abstract. Like, how can you quantify things and apply some type of metrics? Now, again, it's an opinion, right? It's your opinion of how you feel about these things.
Yeah.
And a 5, what you rate as a 3 today may be a 2 tomorrow, right?
Right. Because you realize you don't know as much as you thought. Yeah. Okay.
Right. But then for people that are coming in, say somebody that's listening to this, you go take this free quiz. And then if you sign up for emails, you'll get 20 emails that explain all these points and talk about them. And again, this shows you how I market, right? Like, so I'm helping you to understand why you should know, like, and trust me. Okay. And eventually give me your cold hard cash. Right.
So, and you're providing a valuable service. So it's kind of like, I take a free survey, I go through these 20 questions, And then as a result, not only do I get an idea of where I am on the spectrum of that from my perspective at this point in time, but then I'm going to get a series of, it's probably an automated sequence of carefully crafted bits of information that are going to help inform and educate me, so that even if I do nothing else, I walk away educated.
Yeah. That's the whole idea is, and a similar model can be applied for fiction authors. In my case, I'm trying to help you solve a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a little more straightforward, but the idea is listen, I send you these 20 emails. It's a filter for both of us. You can read these things and you're like, I think this guy's full of garbage. I don't believe any of this stuff. I don't want to, like, God bless, go your way. I'll go mine. I'm okay with that. But other people are going to be like, this resonates with me.
Yeah.
This makes sense. I need to know more. And then you get marinated in it and you're like, oh yeah, now I see why that is. Right. Like the whole idea, like I'll give you an example is in the marketing that you hear at a lot of places, they talk about sending traffic to an Amazon page.
Yeah.
Traffic is the worst thing you can send to an Amazon page if it doesn't convert.
You want to send them buyers, people
who are already
committed to buy. Yeah.
You want to send them people that are the best ideal customer and they buy, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things is like how people say to me, how can you get it where you're driving books into the top 10 of the store with no advertising? Because we have lists that are so laser focused, right? It's only the 1,800 people that are ready to buy book 8.
Yeah.
And when those people show up, the conversion rate is silly. And Amazon's code compels it to go find more people like that. And now we kick their marketing into, and we basically game it because they're like, oh, a 22% conversion rate. And I got another 85,000 people like that 1,200. Let's send them an email. Those people don't buy book 8. They go through the carousel. They go to book 1, right? Yeah. What happens then? Do I have a retention system? So that's another point. Do I have a customer retention system? Something that when people come in, I help them understand how my brand is, what I want them to do is I want them to connect my brand with their identity, right? That it actually is something that they define themselves about, right? And then show them, oh, all the people that are like this, you're a Star Wars fan, you're a Harry Potter fan, whatever it is, here's this community of people like you, where you can feel that you belong and you feel that there's people that understand you and get what you're about. Well, my secret evil plan is, well, this is now my target list. Now I shoot them, send those people into the marketing system, and it's like they're my ideal audience. But they don't ever feel like I'm using them just as a marketing tool. They feel like I'm part of this brand's community. Right. And that's like what I'm doing with this survey is like, if you get it, if this is the way you want to think about your brand, then come on in. We're all like this.
Right.
If you're just looking to be a get rich quick, this is a side hustle. Like we're not here doing that. We're here to build people that are intimately connected with the characters and story world and want to hang out with people just like that.
I love that. That is, that's fantastic. And again, I love that you're focusing on it. Maybe it's not the mindset that a lot of authors would think about, right? They're just thinking about how do I get this to the biggest possible group of people who might want to consume my products.
Yeah. I think that there's, when you're just trying to sell more books, it hurts your brand, right? When you're trying to serve your ideal reader, then you sell more books, right? Because really what sells your book is when they read the book, right? That first book, if they read it and they connect and they get over that barrier, right? Because initially, if you're a new author, it's a barrier to entry. I would rather go read a book I've read 3 times before on that shelf than go find a new author, because I know the experience, right? Yeah. Like, do I need to watch The Godfather again? No, but I will. Right. Even though I can recite all the lines, because I know the experience. I know what when a reader comes in and gets over that barrier to entry, it becomes a barrier to exit, because now they're like, oh, I dig this. I like you're now on my favorite authors list, and I'm going to read, and oh, look at your backlist. I got all this stuff to read. This is awesome. Understanding how your marketing gets that focus, right? That becomes a very different thing. And here's the other part of this whole thing is that most of the marketing that's out there is really designed for the 15%, right? The one-click voracious buyer, which is a big audience. But that means 85% of the people that aren't, you're not addressing.
Right.
That's a much bigger market. If you build a system that addresses that lets people warm up, right? Like, because I don't know how you are, but when I buy something, when I walk into that store, the decision's been made. I've done all my research. I've spent hours laying in my boxers on the couch, looking at websites. I know the thing, like no salesman probably is going to be able to tell me anything I don't know. Right. I've made the decision, like I'm going to buy this, right? That gets negated or neglected in a lot of marketing that I see authors do, is they're not thinking about like, well, what if I'm really not sure? Like, how can I warm up? Well, I'll give you a reader magnet. Well, I don't even know if I want to read a reader magnet. Right. So what goes on in your website that really gets me to understand your brand, understand this ethos, right? Because people want to go into these story worlds to escape. Right. Disney makes more money off its parks. They make more money in their parks than they do off their movies. The biggest thing is merchandising. Okay. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. Because you want to take a bit of that magic home with you.
Yeah. Before COVID, I remember seeing numbers. They at Galaxy's Edge, they were selling $11 million a month in customizable lightsabers. They're glorified flashlights.
Yeah.
Now, if I said that to a guy, he might punch me in the face or hit me with it. Probably more likely punch me than I want to break his lightsaber.
Well, he might hit you with his lightsaber.
Yeah. But like, why are grown ass men like me and you going and spending hundreds of dollars on that? Right.
Yeah.
It's about our identity. It's about who we are and how we associate with that brand. Right. It's the fact that we were as kids and watched that movie. We saw like we had our minds blown, and it's a way for us to connect back with all of that. I mean, it's so deep in our psyche and our identity. And fiction authors have that capacity, right? Like they can do that with their brand. That's the thing that I think is just so cool. And, watching people that you and I know at these conferences do just that, right? Like create these amazing places to escape to.
Well, I think that's so important, because when you think about a brand, and I'll go back to Star Wars because it's one that most people are familiar with, even if they've never watched any of the movies or TV shows or played with the toys or the Lego or all the different things that they've spun out of it. But it's such a recognizable brand. And one of the things that I think is valuable, and this goes back to, I remember Larry Stevenson, who is the CEO of Chapters Indigo, kind of Canada's version of Barnes Noble, Borders, whatever. This was in the heyday of the big box stores and making them very comfortable, like your living room. There was furniture all throughout the stores.
Oh, they were so awesome.
Invite people in, and you had the coffee shop, and there's the same thing in the US, right? And the whole idea was come and just hang out and sit on the couch and read. And one of the challenges we had as managers was people would come in, take their shoes off, have popcorn and just read the books, but not buy anything. But one of the things Larry reminded us was they feel like it's their store. And when Heather Reisman took over the hostile takeover of the two chains and started getting rid of the couches, there was a big protest, like, Heather's taking my couch.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and Heather recognized this too. She also said this, because I was working for head office at the time. She goes, wow, what an amazing thing that they believe that they own this. That's a powerful brand when somebody is so which is why, sometimes you get the fights in Star Wars about, well, Lando Calrissian would never do that. He would never do that, because here's all the evidence from all the scripture I've read. But that's powerful when you can actually have fans feel that engaged in whatever it is you've created, right?
Yeah, one of the big insights for me in this was I work with Chris Kennedy, who science fiction author who has the Four Horsemen universe, and he's a big convention goer, and he was not doing any advertising at all at the time.
Right.
And when we were having one of our discussions, it came out that he has this massive fan club that he let the fans go and incorporate. He doesn't even own it. There's an agreement.
The fans have incorporated a fan club that he does no say in, except he's the guy
he's got some
IP,
say in, yeah. But like these people will show up at, first off, him and David Weber do that at one of these cons. They do an officers dinner that sells out every year. People come dressed as either Weber's World or the Four Horsemen universe and come dressed as officers, right? So people that are spending thousands of dollars to dress up like your characters, they're not thinking about what a book costs.
Yes.
Right. Like, and when you have fans that are either saying, well, if it's a canon mercenary group in this world, here's the book. Here, we've put the rules together. Here's where you go get the stuff for that uniform. Oh, you guys want to create your own mercenary group that is your form of supporting this as a fan club. Well, come register with us and tell us about your group and let us show that you belong in our community, and we give you status, right? These things are really important personal connections. So like people are wondering, like, how is it that he for years were just destroying people in Dragon Con with awards? Like he was getting a lot of heat from the traditional science fiction community. It's like, well, because his fans love him and they go to cons, and they vote.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not just about how good the book is. And it's like, these people, not only did they want Chris and Mark and Kevin and all those guys to win, they were winning with them.
Yeah.
Right. And, that's the kind of thing that's like, we're all looking for that in our lives. We're all looking for people that understand our nerddom and want to be part of it. And they're like, yeah, it's cool. Like, you got it right.
Oh my God, that is so amazingly cool. Oh man, I know I'm gonna have to have you come back on the podcast as we're getting close to the end. Just the last couple things to wrap up. The first thing I want to ask is where people can find out more about you and where they can take the survey and check out the book, and potentially in the order of, hey, check the survey out, see if it's for you. Where do they do that?
Yeah, the main thing to do is to do this is go to joesolari.com, JOESOLARI.com /AMA for author marketing audit.
Okay.
And you'll go there and you'll answer those questions, and then it'll give you your score, and then it'll send you an email. You put your email in. If you're done and you're just happy with your score, unsubscribe. I'm cool with that.
Right.
If you hang out there, you're going to get 20 emails that talk about these different points and how and why they're important and some things to do. I would also say when you go there, when you're looking at all this stuff, come with a critical eye. Like, how could you steal my ideas and use it for your marketing? Like, how could you, like, even if you're marketing cozy mysteries, how could you do something like this to help your fans get to know, like, and trust you? Like, this is old school 1950s David Ogilvy marketing stuff, right? Like, but it's how we buy, right?
Wow. I love that.
So that's the main thing is, do that. And then if along the way you decide that you like some of my other stuff, there'll be more than enough ways for me that I remind you how you can buy from me.
Awesome. I love that at every level they're getting something out of it. And so you're like, hey, you walk away with this piece of information, or walk away with the next bit of information. And they still have the free will to decide if that's for them, which is just brilliant. It's not like they're, I'm locked into this now I'm stuck.
Yeah. There's one other thing you can do. If you go down to joesolari.com, you can also sign up with me for a free 20-minute call. I do them on Thursday mornings. Right. There's no cost. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Yeah. Something I developed out of going to conferences is trying to help people, because again, what's in it for me? If I help people not make mistakes and succeed faster, eventually they will become wealthy authors that want to hire Lisa and I to do all the nonsense work that, one, they're not good at. They can never do as good as us and don't want to do. Right. And that's where I make a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Like, so like there's an aligned interest there, right? It's like people are like, I can't believe you do this and you give us free time. It's like, if I took the same amount of like what my consulting time is worth, I took that same amount and spent it on ads on Facebook, I would never get the results, right?
Yeah.
I would never get the one-to-one connection I have with people.
Yeah.
I would never, like, and believe me, you get on these calls, you don't come away with less work.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no.
Like you'll have clarity, but like you'll like be like, oh wow, I've got a lot of work to do now.
Yeah.
So like, but again, it's because I can take that little bit of time, and I've seen so many author businesses, and I can say, okay, well, what do you, let's get at what you're really trying to do here.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, you're not at a point where you can even worry about 90% of that. You just need to like get your book written.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's fantastic. All right, so last, this is just all gold. The last thing I wanted to ask is, so when you interacted with enough authors, you've had those sessions with people, you've met people at conferences, etc. You've engaged in online discussions, and I've been on lucky enough to have been on panels with you and audio only formats, etc. What's something that you just wish more writers who get frustrated and are overwhelmed, what's one or two things that you think would be really valuable for them to know?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is kind of the topic we've been talking about, is focus on your audience, not what other authors are doing. I mean, you have to look to your genre to understand what the genre expectations are, and cover, you do have to understand how the industry works. But I think too much time we get caught in this community loop of like, how do I fit into the author hierarchy? How do I, what does success look like? And that stuff doesn't matter. Like if you get aligned with your own purpose, like maybe you only want to write 2 books a year and you'd be happy to make a couple $1,000 and like, but then you go to the conference and you're like, oh no, I got to quit my day job and I got to do all this stuff. And it's like, no, you don't. And understand, like, when you start focusing on what your audience wants, right? And you start understanding of what these people are seeking in a particular genre, you don't have to worry about as much, because they're no longer just picking your book because they need something to read. It's because they need to read your book because it's part of who they identify as, right? When that happens, like, quick side story, we were getting ready to buy a new car and I wanted to get a Volvo. Heard all great kinds of stuff about them, all kinds of cool features. And my wife was like, no, we're getting a white BMW. We had a white BMW. We're getting a white BMW. And I was like, not a battle I want to fight. Because that's how she sees part of her identity, is she is a BMW driver, right? It means something, and it does to me too. Don't get me wrong. Like it's part of my status and identity as well. I don't want to make it sound like I'm some altruistic dude, but like that's like a lot of other cars are just as good or better and a lot less expensive, but it's because it is about me and how I perceive myself in the world. And it's the same with people that read, when they're reading books or they're involved in pop culture. When you start thinking about your marketing in that respect and how you can help people escape to this cool world and introduce them to your awesome characters, and they can establish parasocial relationships with these characters, then the marketing just falls into place.
Beautiful. Joe, I want to thank you so much for spending the time to hang out with me today. I hope I can get you to agree to come back on in a future episode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just a reminder where people can find you online and check out the survey again.
Yeah. So joesolari.com and then /AMA will bring you right to the survey page, and you can just get started on that. If you go to joesolari.com, there's a whole bunch of stuff there for you to check out. There's some of my old newsletters for free. There's a lot of free services. You can sign up for those calls, but related to the book attention and adopting these ideas, the first thing to do is go take that survey at joesolari.com/AMA.
Awesome. Joe, thanks again.
Been great, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Oh, so many great things to reflect on with this conversation with Joe. But here are two of the things that I pulled out from this. So the very first one, and I used this in the opening teaser clip for this episode, is Joe reminding us to not assume that the person on stage knows what they're talking about. It doesn't mean that the person on stage is not successful. It doesn't mean that they haven't done an amazing job. And it doesn't mean that they don't have something very valuable to share with you. But just remembering there are other factors at play. For example, again, he used this one example of, I make $1 million a year, but I spend $750,000 on marketing. Well, first you have to have $750,000 in your pocket in order to spend that kind of money, and in order to risk that. And maybe that's something you built up over years. But the other factor, and this is so true, and I see it all the time, is there's so much luck involved in this industry. You can have 100 people all do exactly the same thing, the right thing, and there is no one right thing, but let's say they do the exact same things. They have polished the book as beautifully as possible and edited it, and they have the great sales copy for their book, and they have the perfect cover, and it's just, everything is just gorgeous about the book, and they know who their target audience is, and they've done whatever marketing to the target audience, and it doesn't always work. There's always an element of luck that we cannot control. I think about things like, movie releases or book releases that happened on September 11th, 2001. No one's thinking about anything but obvious what they're thinking about when such tragedy occurs. You could have had the best blockbuster release that disappeared on a day like that, because you can't control what else is happening in the world. You also can't control luck. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I had my very first story was published in 1992, the year I started working in this industry. My first professional sale was not until the early 2000s, after hundreds of rejections and making bits of money here and there selling my stories. And my first self-published book was in 2004. And I've been moderately successful, mid 5-figure earning author for several years now. I've never made it huge. I've never had one gigantic blockbuster that just took off. I've had quite a bit of success along the way, but moderate success. Nothing blockbuster where I'm suddenly a 6- and 7-figure author and I'm suddenly going, do what I did, this one thing, because this will be the magic bullet that solves all your problems. And I'm not dismissing or dissing authors who share that, because they are truly, honestly wanting to help you and say, well, here's what I did and here's what happened. And that's fantastic. But when you're paying attention to those authors, also pay attention to the fact that you can do exactly all the things that they did, follow that script perfectly, and that one element of timing or luck may not come into play. Don't beat yourself up because you did all the right things, or you did all the same things, or you followed the prescription exactly, but it just didn't work, and that's okay. Do not beat yourself up because you didn't have the same success. You didn't do the exact same things they did. And that's always to say to always take everything you see with a bit of a grain of salt and say, well, okay, they did this, but TikTok, for example, and you know what? I don't like TikTok. I'm not interested in it. Well, then find a way to adapt what they did in another way. And this goes back to what Joe said. Find a way to adapt what they did and how they use that platform, not to sell books, but to connect with their readers. And that's probably where the success came from. And that's sort of the second thing I want to focus on or reflect on. And and he says this, he said it twice in two different ways, focusing on how you can serve your ideal reader rather than focusing on how you can sell more books. And guess what? If you focus your time and attention and energy on how you can best serve your ideal reader, that is more naturally going to lead to selling more books. Yes, with luck. But you're setting the stage, you're creating the conditions that make it more likely that that luck is going to happen. Focus on how you can serve your ideal reader. And that's something I still am struggling with, and I still need to do a better job of. I think I do an okay job with this podcast and with my business of writing and publishing on serving my reader, my listeners, my consumers, the people who follow me, by providing them reflections and insights and thoughts on the business of writing and publishing. If you're listening, chances are I'm serving some of those needs for you. So I think I've been successful at that. What I haven't done as well is looking at my fiction and nonfiction, the other things that I write that aren't related to the business of writing and publishing, and thinking about how I can better serve those readers. Now, I only have so much time in a day, and again, I'm not going to beat myself up that I haven't been great at it, but I'm going to continue to learn. I just went and bought Joe's books directly from him. Oh, and there's a great upsell thing that he had. So I get the book for, I think it's $5.99 or $4.99 or something like that, US, buy direct from him, which I could read on BookFunnel app. Oh, love it. Downloaded it to my Kobo as well, so I can read it on a really nice e-reader rather than on a phone. But then there was a thing saying, hey, while you're here, do you want to get Attention, like the book that started this all? Not Attention, sorry. I'm just looking at it on my phone here for Advantage, sorry, the book that started all. And it was like, normally it's a regular price, but it was 50% off. So for an extra $3, and so suddenly for $8.99, I suddenly had both books that I can enjoy and learn more from by listening to a great guy like Joe. I haven't yet gone and done the interview. I didn't have time, but I did want to get his books so I could start digging into them. I was a little disappointed they weren't available in audio, so I really would much rather listen to Joe. Even I'd listen to Joe's AI voice read the book. Just letting you know, Joe, I'd buy that from you, and I would pay more to get those because it'd just be easier for me to consume them that way. Think about your reader. How can you better serve them? So, Joe, if you're listening, come on, dude. Get me an audiobook so I can give you more money. Anyways, and I do love listening to him. I would listen to someone else read the book, but I really enjoy listening to Joe. I enjoy talking to him. So there you go. So again, that is just a rambling reflection, as they often are. But those are a couple of things that I've reflected on based on the conversation you just heard with myself and Joe. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts? What are your reflections? What are some of the things that you heard in this episode that you would love to share? Because I'd love to learn from what you're reflecting on and even share that with listeners in future episodes. And you can leave your comments over at starkreflections.ca. Again, at me on Twitter at Mark Leslie. Email me, mark@markleslie.ca. I'd love to hear what you were thinking about as you were going through and listening to that. What were you reflecting on? But that is it for this episode. That's it for my reflections. I will be back next week, as I always am, every Friday, consistently for 5 years. I cannot break this. I will see you next week for episode 325. And so, until next week, and until episode 325, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.